Okay, hi. I'm Rohan Srivastava. I'll be the first and third speaker for government side of this motion. Is anybody not ready? Okay. Um, if not, I will start time in three, two, one. Okay, so to begin with some definitions, this house is going to be the board member as defined in the motion, and the framework is going to be net benefits for the board member themselves because they're the ones making the decision. The main thing that the board member wants is to be reappointed, and they'll achieve this best by serving the needs of the people, especially those of the class of the appointing board, which is like the borough president and the city council. But this house's individual concerns also matter, and we're going to say that this house is most likely middle class as well, or high middle class considering their involvement in the local government, which is again not going to be a low income role, especially because it's a volunteering position. You need to have enough money to devote time to this position. Okay, with all that out of the way, I will go into my two contentions. First contention, more tax money. Luxury condos are obviously expensive, meaning that property taxes for these places will be high because property tax is based off of estimated valuation. Furthermore, these kinds of condos often require a lot of special services. For example, a luxury condo could, for example, require more hot water than other housing areas, and they also often require more upkeep. This all means that a lot more money will be going to the city just because of the existence and usage of these condos. Just by developing these condos, the city gains more money in taxes. Now, we consider who will be living in these condos. They're going to be rich people, as nobody else would be able to afford them. Rich people tend to spend a lot more money than less advantaged people because they can afford to. Now, if these people were already living elsewhere in New York City, there's no tax benefit from this. But this will be attractive housing for people outside of New York City as well. If even a few millionaires decide to move into New York City because of the existence of this housing, tens of thousands of more in tax dollars will come to the city. And that's going to be a huge benefit. So, given all that we have all of this tax money, why is it so important under this framework? First of all, this money can go into building more schools, better funding schools, funding more social programs, or even, like what opposition side is arguing, we can use this money to expand public parks. Now, this will easily tie under the framework of helping the city. But judges, also consider who is appointing these board members. They're the people that are paid by city taxes, right? So if this board member really wants to be reappointed, then they want to be passing policies that'll bring more money to the people who are making these appointments, that'll bring more money for these people, and therefore that's also going to be a huge benefit under the framework. Now I'm going to move on to my second contention about community growth. And these are going to be the indirect effects of an increasingly wealthy population. Wealthier populations bring higher value to the area, leading to positive effects to businesses. Wealthy customers are simply more valuable to these businesses. The cash flow is huge. Wealthy customers can afford to spend more at these businesses. This brings wealth and opportunity to family and local businesses, helping longtime citizens. This also brings an increasingly investing-ready population. This brings the potential of investments for businesses, manufacturing, and companies in the boroughs to increase. Business growth in the area also brings in more external investment. It's as simple as that. Businesses, exports, and economic flow grows and thrives with the increase of high-value housing, something that Brooklyn has such a shortage of. Now, subpoint B. Landlords and property companies will be more eager to buy property and create new housing in Brooklyn, with the increased property value in the area. All of our previous points help this too. The higher value a community has, the more land demand and therefore housing pressure is created. This brings in real incentive to build new housing in Brooklyn, especially for the prominent class in Brooklyn, the middle and upper middle class. Our side provides a concrete solution to the New York City housing crisis, therefore bringing more affordability and ease of access to living in Brooklyn. Brooklyn has a huge shortage of luxury housing, and we help fix this issue, as well as assisting with middle-class housing. This differs from political solutions to the housing crisis, as the housing crisis within New York City is a real supply-side problem and needs to be solved from the supply side angle. Simply providing more and more subsidies, freezing rent more and more, isn't going to create a permanent solution to this problem. So what we're doing is we're bringing more housing to the area, making it more attractive for landlords to build more housing in this area and actually find a way to solve this problem. The addition of luxury condos may seem unintuitive for fixing affordability in New York City, but it is in fact the correct pathway to do so. By serving the needs of the people, the Brooklyn Borough President and City Council will be more likely to reappoint this house as a board member, which is the benefit under the framework, especially considering the fact that the Borough President and City Council members are likely upper middle class, the exact demographic explicitly benefiting from this change. So, if we can look over the entire case again, my first contention is going to be about having more tax money. Having more tax money is going to come from the increased property taxes from the luxury condos, as well as the more money that new millionaires inside of New York City can spend within the city. And all of this tax money will benefit the framework under two parts. They can benefit the people by, for example, funding more social programs, building more schools, uplifting more impoverished people. There's a lot of things that a good government can do with more tax money. And especially we can see that there's a big benefit here because the new mayoral administration under Zoran Mamdani does seem to have a very large emphasis on affordability, and tax money will be very beneficial here. The tax money can also benefit things like public safety and help fight crime. And so that's going to benefit the framework under helping the people. But also consider the fact that that creating more tax money for the government is going to bring more money for the people appointing the board members, which is what the board member wants in order to get reappointment, because the people appointing the board members are paid by city taxes. And then the second contention has two subpoints, and it's based on the ideas of community growth. The idea that a wealthier population coming into the city makes it more desirable and brings more money to local businesses, and therefore allows more benefits within the community. It will show higher businesses, exports, and economic flow because of increased high-value housing, which will increase the overall prosperity of the entire community of Brooklyn. And our second subpoint here was that landlords and property companies would simply be more eager to buy more property because it's more desirable as more people want to move into this borough. This brings in the real incentive to build new housing in Brooklyn, and in total, that all means more affordable housing is built in the area, which means that we provide a mechanism to solve the housing crisis, which is a huge issue in Brooklyn and absolutely something that would see benefits for this house. And for all of these reasons, I'm very proud to propose. Thank you.
Hello. Let me just set up my timer. Just a little off-time roadmap. I'm just going to go through this house framework. Then I'm just going to go into their contentions and then finish off on our case. And if time permits, I'll just go over my framework again. Hello, Judge. My name is Rafa Schwartz, and I am very proud to oppose the motion that this house as a Brooklyn Community Board member would approve a luxury condo over a park expansion. So they defined this house as a Brooklyn Community Board member. We agree with that because that is how the motion defines it. And their framework is the net benefit for board member, but we think it would be better if we approach this on a utilitarian standpoint and the net benefits for most people in New York. Their contention one was about how it would get more tax money. But Judge, the tax revenue will be minuscule in comparison to the benefits that we offer, Judge. That we can gain tax money by taxing the hyper-rich, which, as Gov said, is a major part of the platform that Zoran Mamdani got elected on, is raising taxes on hyper-rich, and that in turn can create more tax money instead of actually taking away from creating more greenery in a borough that is known for its greenery. So as I said, we can gain tax money by taxing the hyper-rich instead of tending to them and creating more housing for them. And so their second contention was that, in their second contention, they stated that Brooklyn has a lack of luxury housing right now. But I have two answers to this. Number one, that is simply not true. There are certain neighborhoods in Brooklyn, such as Dumbo, Williamsburg, and Greenpoint, that offer tons and plentiful luxury housing, more than necessary. And also, Judge, if you really want luxury housing, that is what Manhattan offers. What Brooklyn offers is a calmer environment than Manhattan, and that is what is appealing to Brooklyn, and that is why we need to focus on maintaining what makes Brooklyn appealing, and that is the calmer environment, and that can be benefited by creating a better park system and by approving this park extension. They also said that wealthy customers that will be brought in by this luxury condo are helpful to these local businesses. But Judge, I just want you to consider the small amount of people that will actually be living in this single luxury condo. It will be probably around 400. It's not going to be a significant amount to actually impact this, and also it does not help their framework or our framework of net benefits for most people in New York, or theirs as net benefits for the board member. We have two contentions. Our first contention is on societal welfare and net benefits for the most people. If we approve a luxury condo, we are only impacting a handful of people that can actually afford it. As I said, probably around 400 people, while the borough of Brooklyn has around 2.3 million people. However, if we choose to approve a public park extension, we are impacting the entire community of Brooklyn by adding green spaces and improving the parks and rebuttal to their contention too. This is what makes Brooklyn appealing and what differentiates Brooklyn from other boroughs such as Manhattan. Judge, this is incredibly important because in the motion, it says that we are talking about a community board member, which must show to us that the community is clearly very key to this house, to the community board member. We do not positively impact the Brooklyn community simply by constructing condo that will house only a few rich families, only around 400 people. How we actually improve and impact the Brooklyn community is by extending on our public parks and improving our public park system, because that will affect more people, and that directly aligns with our framework of net benefits for New Yorkers, and for most New Yorkers. So as I said, we positively impact the community of Brooklyn when we undertake a project that will improve everyone in Brooklyn's lives by adding to the parks. Judge, I want you to consider this. In such an urban, overcrowded city that New York is, Judge, we do not need to focus on adding more of these big buildings that, like, quote unquote, define the New York City skyline. But what we need to do is add to what actually needs to be improved on, and that is the greenery, Judge. You cannot say that New York has enough greenery right now. What New York has is enough buildings, enough big buildings. That is honestly all New York has. That is all the projects that are being worked on across New York right now, is these new buildings, these new sky rises. What we actually need to work on is adding to the greenery and adding to what we don't have enough of right now. I would say, like, in every borough, there's probably only like one actually big park right now. It's like probably in the Bronx, it's like Pelham in like Central Park and then Prospect Park, and we need more of that. We need more big parks across the city, and to actually impact the community of Brooklyn. And yeah, as I said, especially in Brooklyn, which has the reputation of being like the greener part of New York, like say Staten Island, and what Brooklyn has that Staten Island doesn't have is kind of this balance between urbanization and greenery, and we need to work on that, maintaining that balance instead of just promoting more buildings, which is what we're seeing in every single other borough. And we need to keep Brooklyn unique from the different boroughs, and we need to maintain what makes Brooklyn special. Judge, we do not want Brooklyn, the only part of New York that actually has balance between urbanization and parks, to turn into just another Manhattan. As I said in a rebuttal earlier, if you want luxury housing, if that is what you are seeking, there are plentiful options in certain parts of Brooklyn, and more importantly, there are plentiful options in Manhattan. You are going to Brooklyn if you are looking for a calmer environment, and building a luxury condo is not going to improve that at all. The impact of this, Judge, is that we are urbanizing a city that frankly does not need to be further urbanized. Our contention, too, is on environmental benefits. Housing complexes such as this luxury condo use up a ton of energy due to the lights and heating constantly being on to cater to the lifestyle that these people want to live. Also, Judge, consider this, that due to the fact that it's a luxury condo, it will probably have apartments that are bigger than the average apartments, so it will take more power to heat and light a bigger area of space than just a normal condo, and that just does not positively positively impact the environment. Judge, providing electricity for the whole building puts a strain on the local power grid and burns a ton of fossil fuels, which is something that does not beneficial in the world we live in today. This is exceptionally true for things that would certainly be in the apartment building 24/7, such as hot water, lighting, heating. And furthermore, building the apartment building, the actual building process, is super energy intensive, and you have to use a ton of resources such as wood, cement, and steel, and you would have to pollute the environment for years on end with endless emissions because you need to power all the construction vehicles needed to construct the luxury condo. And actually, when you finally build it, we will just keep using energy. Did you see so many buildings across the city have like these little stickers and these little panels on the front door that say like energy efficiency, and they're all D's, they're all F's, because they're just using up so much light and so much heat. And what you need to consider, Judge, is that on the other hand, extending a public park would lead to more vegetation and a net benefit. On a scientific standpoint, more carbon dioxide is absorbed with more trees, more oxygen is released, and all of this better impacts the air quality in New York, and all of that better impacts the people of New York because they are living in a cleaner city. You simply cannot say, Judge, and Gov simply cannot say that adding to our park system and increasing the amount of vegetation and greenery we see in Brooklyn would lead to a net negative for the environment and a net negative for the people that live in Brooklyn. Judge, it is proven that areas with more trees tend to be less warm, have higher air quality, due to the fact that they have have higher air quality due to the fact that they have more trees. This is a clear net benefit for the people of Brooklyn, one that the government simply cannot provide. So, on the framework of utilitarianism and the net benefits for the most people in New York, we are impacting not 400 people that are living in a certain condo. We are impacting the 2.5 million people that live in the borough of Brooklyn by improving their environment and also societal welfare. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Eitan Dondev, the second speaker for government side. For a quick off-time roadmap, we will start by defending our contentions and then talking about their two contentions. My time starts now. First of all, on our contention of more tax money, they said it's completely minuscule in comparison to op benefits because it would only be like 400 people living in these condos. But then they mentioned the taxes raised on the hyper-rich by Mamdani. But that's actually contradicting themselves because who will be taxed by these taxes? The hyper-rich, the ones that are moving in with this luxury housing. We are literally bringing more taxes in and supporting Mamdani's higher hyper-rich taxes. We are bringing in money to the city that only supports us. We are quite literally bringing in more people to be taxed by this extreme tax so that the town can have even more money. Mamdani only supports what we're talking about, and the tax money is not minuscule. It is a lot of money. It is millions, and it will go to help the city. And also, it isn't a rebuttal. They're just weighing. Our effect is still entirely unrebutted, essentially. And they say that we just do this instead of taking away greenery, which is what they say. This is what they say the whole time. They just say that we say what we're doing this, but we're taking away greenery. They don't really provide any actual rebuttal. They just say, oh, you should be making greenery instead. You should be making greenery. You should be helping more people. And you guys kept saying that you can make that more tax money by taxing the hyper-rich instead, but taxing the hyper-rich can happen alongside this. Taxing the hyper-rich is supported by our side. We support taxing the hyper-rich because that means these people in these luxury condos can be supporting the community more. Taxing the hyper-rich is not a rebuttal. It is assisting our side.
PI.
Yeah.
Do you think that the New York City and Mamdani especially is going to tax the hyper rich, like without this like new development?
They would tax the hyper-rich on either side. Mamdani has made it clear that he plans to do this. So if anything, our side brings more money because we bring more hyper-rich to be taxed by this. Mamdani is not changing his plans based on one luxury condo in Brooklyn. Most of his focus is on the wider city and the housing crisis, which we actually help with. For our contention to have community growth, you just told us that it's not true and that only 400 people won't bring a huge benefit. But 400 wealthy people to shop, 400 wealthy people that could tell their friends to come, that could, 400 potential investors, and even more potential landlords, which we talked about. This is completely, them just saying it's not true is just ignoring our contention. It's not a real rebuttal. And they said that communities already exist that provide plentiful luxury housing, but it's just completely unfactual because Brooklyn has a shortage of luxury housing. That is an issue in Brooklyn. They have too much parks, too much greenery, and they don't have enough luxury housing. They don't have enough space for their main income part, which is middle class, upper middle class. They actually don't have this housing, and it's making it difficult for people to live there. People are moving out of Brooklyn, moving into Manhattan and other boroughs. And they say that Brooklyn is calmer and down to earth, and they should focus on being calmer and down to earth, but they already are calm and down to earth because they have so many parks. They should balance it out by adding more housing so that people can actually enjoy these parks. Because if you just look up parks in Brooklyn, you can literally scroll pages and pages and pages of lists of parks in Brooklyn. It is by far the most green borough, and it has way too many parks. You do not need another park. And they're acting like this is going to be such a monumental assistance that we're only helping 400 while they're helping 2.5 million. But there's already, almost 100 parks in Brooklyn, and they're just adding one more. Is that really going to help every 2.5 million people? And it's not going to be a huge park. They say there's only one big park like Central Park, but it won't be a huge park like Central Park. This is only one condo that they're replacing. This is not 10,000 condos that they're replacing. This won't be a Central Park. This will just be a little neighborhood playground or just a place for they're just like a little green group of trees. It won't be changing the lives of 2.5 million people to such a significant extent. If anything, it'll only impact a few hundred who just happen to go there on a daily basis. And they say that doesn't help either framework, but we've proved that it does help our framework. It helps both frameworks because not only does it help the people of Brooklyn by increasing the value of their businesses, increasing investment, increasing factories, exports, but also it attracts more landlords, which brings more affordability and more housing to actually fix this housing crisis. We are the only side that actually offers solution to the housing crisis in Brooklyn and in New York on the whole. And they say that there are places like Manhattan to get this luxury housing, but yes, that is true. So Brooklyn should match this. People are moving out of Brooklyn because there's not enough luxury housing. There is a significant shortage, and Brooklyn shouldn't just be staying with only that calm, down to earth feel. They should be matching these other boroughs. And this really snowballs into real growth on so many fronts by proving that Brooklyn is open to more landlords. That these more landlords will want to build, and this is the entire point of the contention that was entirely missed. We will have so much more affordability, so much more landlords, so much more property value, and it will actually attract growth and fix the housing crisis through a supply side solution, which has proven to be effective in the past. For their contention one of societal welfare, they say that this affects the whole borough, not just 400. But we've already said this doesn't just help the whole borough. There are already so many parks. This won't be helping every single person in the area. Op misses the entire point of building a luxury condo. There are so much better long-term effects than just these 400 people. The whole community is benefited. Furthermore, why does increasing the number of parks help everyone? Most people are working long office jobs and don't spend much time in parks anyway. How do these benefits compare to anything we've shown? There are already, again, so many parks. Just look up parks in Brooklyn, go on Google Maps. You could scroll for pages and pages and pages of lists. Brooklyn is, on Google Maps, you can see so many dots of green. And it doesn't really seem like, again, this contention that they've made doesn't really have any real warranted impact. They just keep stressing that we need a balance of greenery and buildings. But what does that really impact? Other boroughs really don't have as much greenery as Brooklyn, and still they're succeeding better than Brooklyn is. They're getting more income, they're getting more growth, they're getting more businesses. Brooklyn is falling below the others and should catch up. They need to balance their borough. And they're also contradicting themselves, because does this one complex completely urbanize the borough, or does it not have impact to be worth it? Because they not only tell us that we're just completely urbanizing the borough, it doesn't need to be urbanized anymore, but they also tell us that it doesn't have enough impact to be worth it. So is it too much urbanization or too little urbanization? Complete contradiction. And for contention 2, they said energy benefits because the lifestyle is expensive and so much energy will be used. But these families that would move into New York, they would use this energy anyway. So the impact to world fossil fuels is negligible because they would live in another town. They would live in the outskirts of New York City. They would live in some New Jersey suburbs that just have a train connection to New York City. If anything, the condensed condos need less lighting, less energy for stuff like pools or mansions because they're so much more condensed. They're in the city. They don't need as much lighting. They don't need as much heating because it's not as much of a big building. So we are actually saving energy. So we turn this contention onto them. We are saving fossil fuels and saving the environment more than them. And they talk about this greenery from extending parks that helps the air and helps the air quality, helps world climate change. But this is also incredibly insignificant. Think about how small of a park this would be instead of one condominium. This wouldn't be a world-changing amount of climate change that is decreased. And you might at best do a 5% increase in the amount of greenery in the area, but that's completely negligible in comparison to all the benefits that we've stated. And finally, when there's a housing crisis going on and so many people are struggling, how on earth do you fund this? Approving a private company to develop condos is entirely free from New York City because the landlords actually gain money from this, but building these public parks even loses more from taxes, adding on to our first contention. If you're flowing these contentions, you should add that to what we've written, because this is not only on our side do we bring taxes, but on their side we lose taxes. It's worse than the status quo. And approving a private company to develop condos is actually free for New York City and brings in money, brings in funds, while they are losing funds building this park, that bringing in trees, bringing in landscapers, clearing out areas with no real funding that they've offered. And the only real exclusive impact that they've brought is the theory of having a calmer, down-to-earth area, and in theory, having better air quality, which doesn't stand anything against everything we've said. Thank you.
All right. Just for a little off-time roadmap, I'm going to first rebut all of their contentions, and then second, I'm going to rebut their refutations for our contentions. Just provide a little defense. Okay. So first, I'm going to start my time now. I'm just going to make like a little observation. I think that it's pretty fair to say that Gov's whole case is built around the fact and this argument that like 400 people will do such immense great things for the world, right? Khan's side is saying they won't actually do that much, and I will prove this stuff, and that all the 400 people will do, they have like a very like minuscule impact. So they're in their first contention, they talk about more tax money, right? And like property taxes are going to be extremely high, right? This will be minuscule in comparison. I want to bring up a number that my partner said, right? There are 2.3 million people in Brooklyn and around 8 million people in New York City, right? The added increase of tax revenue from 400 people is not going to positively, like super positively affect the local community for two reasons. A, as I previously stated, it's such an insignificant number for the sheer amount of people that already pay taxes in New York City. But second of all, tax revenue goes to the city and goes to the state. It doesn't go to the local community board. This idea that the local community board is going to benefit greatly from this increase in tax money that these 400 people are doing, the tax money that the 400 people are going to pay for the city, it's not going straight to the community board. It's not going to like help the people in the immediate surrounding area of the apartment complex. No, what it'll actually do is be spread out all across the city and New York State, trying to help upwards of 25 million people. So this idea that this tax money is going to have such a significant impact in their framework, which is like the net benefit for like, the people who the board member is really servicing, is just not true. Right. Also, they talk about how, all this tax money is going to help fund schools and education and parks in the borough and the community. As I previously stated, this tax money is a tiny amount and will be spread out across all of New York State and all of New York City. So really, it's not
POI.
going to have any of the positive effects that they say. I'll take your time. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. How wealthy do you think the people moving into these condos will be?
I think semi-wealthy, yes. Pretty wealthy. But again, there's such a small number of them, so they won't really have an impact. And also their tax revenue is going to be spread out all across New York State and New York City. Okay. Going to their second contention, right? They said, I'm going to quote a couple of things they said. They said, first of all, Brooklyn has too much greenery, quote unquote. They say Brooklyn has too much parks, quote unquote. They say Brooklyn has too much green space, quote unquote. And they also say Brooklyn has a lack of luxury housing, right? All of these statements are untrue. Brooklyn does not have enough greenery. We need more greenery. Greenery has so many positive impacts that we outline in our second contention. I'll come to later. But additionally, they say that Brooklyn has a lack of luxury housing. This is not true. We have so many like different areas in Brooklyn. We have a ton of luxury housing. We have Dumbo. We have Williamsburg. We have Greenport. All of these areas that like hundreds of thousands of people live in have a ton of expensive housing, right? Also, if you really want affordable housing, this is what Manhattan offers. Brooklyn is supposed to be a place where where it's like a sort of a calmer environment than Manhattan, right? This is what is so appealing about Brooklyn, and this is what we need to focus on maintaining. And what makes Brooklyn appealing is the parks and the green space. Also, the Gov side talks about how wealthy customers are going to be able to help local businesses. Now, judges, I want to say something. Do you think that wealthy people are going to like want to shop in local businesses as much as the Gov side says it? I don't think so. I think they're not going to shop in like local bodegas or delis. They're going to shop in like Whole Foods or Walmart or Target. They're going to shop, or like maybe not even those. They're going to shop at fancy brands, right? They're going to target like fancy goods and services, right? Wealthy customers are almost definitely going to prioritize high-end luxury or niche products that are not offered by typical local businesses, just like essential services like a bodega or a deli, like I mentioned, right? Or a convenience stores or like maybe a local restaurant, right? Rich like people who will move in, they will shop at exclusive like boutiques or online luxury retails instead. So this idea that rich people like moving into these condos are going to so positively affect local surrounding businesses and in like mom and pop shops is just completely unfactual, right? Now, they also make this whole case for like the housing increase, right? They say that like we're gonna have a lot more housing in New York City and especially in Brooklyn, and we're gonna have lower prices for this housing, right? And their whole case is built on this fact that wealthy customers will move in, they will see a golden investment opportunity, they will buy land for new housing, and then they will somehow develop that land. Now, those include three very important links. Wealthy customers, A, are going to buy land, right? Which I don't think is going to happen because they might put it in like things that are more likely to return a higher ROI than like other affordable housing in New York. But they're also going to develop that land. I don't think so. They could just sit on it. But there are many reasons why this is just untrue. So first of all, ROI, as I mentioned before, low profit margins, affordable housing and general like developing housing and like buying land in New York often returns like lower returns on investment compared to other types of investments like investing in the stock exchange, investing in different companies, doing stuff. So really they're not going to get that much profit from like investing in housing. So I think it's sort of ludicrous to assume that rich people are actually going to be so enticed by this new development opportunity. Also, high costs, land, labor, and material costs are like super elevated in Brooklyn and New York City because it's like sort of a popular area to live. And that also adds on to this fact that like, it's less viable for developers and rich people who want to seek maximum profit. They're not going to invest in in housing, they're going to invest in other investment opportunities. Also, wealthy individuals, they don't want to buy up. Like, even if they were not going to develop stuff, the gov side might argue they're going to buy up existing housing or like they're going to, sort of revamp old apartment buildings to have new stuff, right? This is just like really not true. Wealthy people are going to be much more likely to sort of want to park their money or invest in things that are going to return higher profit, like I mentioned before. So really, wealthy people are not going to increase the housing supply in New York. Okay. So look, also to rebut our first contention, the Gov side basically said like their only refutation to it was that the increase in the number of parks isn't important. And as I quoted before, they said Brooklyn has too much green space. We have too many parks. I think they said if you look up on Apple Maps, you can see too many green dots, right? This is totally untrue, judges. In such an urban and overcrowded area like New York City, we do not need to focus on adding more buildings and adding more noise, air, and light pollution, right? We need to focus on things like adding more greenery, adding more parks, especially in Brooklyn, which has had a reputation of being a greener part of New York than like other boroughs such as, Queens, Manhattan, Staten Island, maybe not Staten Island, but like definitely the Bronx. It's like super enticing. It's a part of Brooklyn we need to preserve. We don't want to have like new housing. We want to actually have new greenery, right? Also, we don't want Brooklyn, the only place of New York that actually has balance between urbanization and parks, to turn into like another Manhattan, which is just concrete everywhere you look. You can get out of any subway station in Manhattan, besides like Central Park, which takes I think like 15% of the area of it. All of it is literally just there's like no plants. It's awful. Okay. Now to like I'm gonna defend some of our contentions, right? So they say that um also their whole taxing thing, right? They in my POI I asked them, in my POI I asked the gov side if they think that Mamdani is going to tax rich people like before and after, like even if this luxury housing is going to happen, or if even it's not going to happen. And they said yes. Now, well, what does this mean? It's non-unique. Their whole impact on how there's going to be more taxing of the rich, which is going to help like local communities in New York City with this housing plan, is just not true because Mamdani and the new mayoral administration are going to tax like all rich people. So it's totally non-unique, right? Um, Additionally, you know, even if Mamdani like does tax these 400 people, as I outlined earlier in my speech, that the impact of taxing those 400 people is really not going to be that big because all this money is going to get spread out, and the idea that it's just going to be spread out inside the community is just not true. It's going to be spread out all across New York City and New York State. I'm gonna move into my grace period. I'm just gonna go over our case. So our first contention was about societal welfare, right? So if we improve a luxury condo, we can only actually help a couple of handful of people. And in my previous speech, I just told you how I basically eliminated their ideas of how it helps us tax revenue, how it increases education, and I also eliminated their idea of how it's going to increase housing, and I eliminated their idea of how it's going to help wealthy businesses by saying that wealthy people are really just not going to do all of what they say they are. Their links just really don't stand after this, right? We also talked about environmental benefit, and they basically said in their second speech that actually, apartment buildings, it's not going to
Hello.
make that much money. Yeah, I have like 10 seconds left to my grace period.
Okay.
Um, I'm just gonna say really quickly, building apartment buildings is super energy intensive. You have to use a ton of resources. Powering these things is super energy intensive. There's gonna be a lot of like pollution, and it's just not good for the surrounding area or for the world in a whole. Thank you.
One second. Let me just set up my timer. I've got 4 minutes and a half, I guess. Okay. So my time starts now. Hello, Judge. I'm the third speaker, and I'm just going to go through some clarifications, some clashes, and then I'll do my ballots and talk about how we win on the framework. We've been talking a lot about luxury housing, and then the Gov states that we do not have enough luxury housing in Brooklyn. But I want to refute this by saying that, number one, we have enough large condos and fancy condos in Dumbo, Williamsburg, and Greenpoint, which are actually some of the bigger neighborhoods in Brooklyn. But not only if we don't have enough luxury housing in the form of huge skyscraper condos, Judge, we have luxury housing in the form of brownstones. And we have brownstones, and that is what is the luxury housing that is unique to Brooklyn. Clashes are one of the biggest clashes in this debate has been on taxes, but Judge, as we've stated in all of our speeches, we can tax in other ways. In a POI, when asked about is taxing the hyper rich unique to whether we have this luxury condo or not, Gov 2 said that it is not. Judge, that is clearly helping our case because it is just stating that we can tax the hyper rich without this luxury condo, and we can have more tax money to help the entirety of Brooklyn without this condo. That is not unique to building this condo, but what is unique to improving the greenery in Brooklyn is that it will help everyone and it will lead to a cleaner borough. Another clash point is on the environment. They said that people will be using energy anyways, whether or not they live in this condo. But Judge, he also said that they would be maybe in the New Jersey suburbs, which do not have luxury condos on the same scale as New York does. And Judge, more importantly, no matter what these people did in their old homes, that will not rival the amount of energy that a New York condo spends. And building these condos, it will be very energy wasteful and will use a ton of resources. So our first ballot is on utilitarianism. Judge, we affect the most people because we improve the environment for 2.3 million people in New York, whilst they only affect 400 people. They admitted that we do not need the condo to tax the hyper rich. Judge, this just shows that there are other ways to accumulate extra tax money than to take away from than to build this new condo. And that is what is going to happen in the Zoran administration, is whether we have this condo or not, we are going to be further taxing the hyper rich. Judge, this is clear. Of course, adding to parks will help the people of the borough of Brooklyn. Judge, we are reputed for striking a balance between urbanization and greenery. And this is what we need to maintain. Judge, this is very important. We need to let Manhattan build extra condos, while we need to focus on what makes our borough of Brooklyn different. Our second ballot is on the environment. Judge, we win here because, yes, it might be a small environmental improvement, but it is an improvement at that. It has been proven, Judge, that even adjacent blocks right next to each other, can be 10 degrees hotter than the other simply due to the amount of trees on a given block. Having more trees and having more greenery is proven to help the block and help the area around it, and adding to the parks and adding a park extension would help our environment in Brooklyn. Judge, it is about the principle. Do we want to go to what Manhattan is doing and just build more and more condos and make New York into this concrete world, just full of big buildings, or do we want to work on our environment? Instead of further harming our environment, Judge, we are improving it. Gov is harming the environment, and we are improving it. This is a clear net benefit to the people of Brooklyn, and that is our unrefuted framework. Judge, we go to our third ballot, which is the reputation of Brooklyn. We need to preserve the fact that Brooklyn is known to be a calmer borough because, Judge, why would you want to add yet another building in the concrete world that New York is? Let Manhattan build more and more condos, and keep catering to the wealthy. I'm going into my grace here. While Brooklyn focuses on actually improving its greenery and improving what makes it Brooklyn. Why would you not want to live in a place, Judge, that not only has good housing, as I established, but that is also beautiful and clean? Reminder, judges, that my partner totally eliminated their ideas of how surrounding local businesses will benefit from the condo and how there will be more housing. Because, Judge, as we have established, there is not a housing crisis in New York. Thank you, Judge.
Start off with
Yeah. Okay. Is anybody not ready? All right. In that case, I will begin my time in 3, 2, 1. Okay, judges, the very first thing that I want to address is the very last statement of third op. The fact that there is no housing crisis in New York City. This is first off an entirely new point, but secondly, it is entirely untrue. Half of Zoran Mamdani's entire campaign was affordability in buying things on the streets, as well as affordability in owning a house. The whole point, part of his campaign is literally rent freezes in order to get people into more houses. That is completely not true. There absolutely is a housing crisis in New York. Now, let's see on their idea that wealthy people won't buy from local businesses. That's just not
POC?
true. POC, yeah.
Yeah, it was a slip up. I said housing crisis in Brooklyn.
Oh, okay.
With luxury housing.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Then I will resume time at 29 seconds in 3, 2, 1. Okay, as my partner and I have both said, there is a lack of vacancy in luxury homes in Brooklyn, which means that there is a demand for more luxury homes. So anyway, I'll move on from that. So the appeal of living in New York City is the city itself. These rich people will walk on the streets, they will buy bagels from local stores, and they will live like New Yorkers, because if they didn't want to live like New Yorkers, they wouldn't be living in the city. So yes, small businesses will be supported. They also talk about how people will be taxed. POO.
That's a new argument.
I'm responding to your second op. I didn't get a chance to respond to that.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I will resume time at 51 in 3, 2, 1. So they talk about how people will be taxed either way, and they'll tax all people. But judges, how will Mamdani tax people not in his city? We bring wealthy people into New York City to be taxed. This is inside of our C1, and by the very policies that they claim to support their side. Judges, keep in mind, Brooklyn is in a shortage of luxury and middle-class housing. It is not in a shortage of parts. Again, look at Apple Maps, search up Brooklyn Parks, look at Zillow, and search up luxury condo for sale. Or look at the news. Mamdani has been talking about the housing crisis all year, not about the shortages of trees or shortage of grass. There is a housing crisis, and we are addressing it. Now I'm going to go into 3 ballots. Judges, ballots are the 3 things that should go directly onto your RFD for why this round is a clear government vote. First, we affect a greater scope. Look at the effect of adding only one more small park to the obscene amount that is already in Brooklyn. Opposition tries to claim that it affects 2.5 million people, but it will only be a minuscule change in people's lives, and maybe only a few thousand people that are minorly affected. It also, judges, only affects the people that live nearby the park. To say that it's 2.5 million people is such an abuse of numbers. Now, look at the 10 million New Yorkers affected by the tax income from Brooklyn, especially with Mamdani's new taxes on the rich in mind. Not only is that a higher scope than just one borough or just one park, but this goes to help public safety, education, aid, and so many other things that New York City is clearly in a shortage of. So because of our greater scope, this round is a government vote. Second ballot, we address the housing crisis. The point is that landlords will want to enter because more people want to move into Brooklyn, especially people in the middle class. Judges, for the last item on your RFD, I want to stress so much the fact that this snowballs. If we get the hyper rich into the borough, it becomes a more desirable place to live, which means more people come in, which means that we create a market within the upper middle class for housing. Opposition has never addressed this point. Now, judge, let's assume that all impacts from both sides are true. We're not going to go into why we win anyway under both their framework and the framework that we offered in speech 1 and they ignored. Their first unique impact is climate change, and we outweigh this on probability and magnitude. Judges, in order to buy this climate change impact, you need to buy that for some reason, all the people that move into the condos would use more energy despite living in a smaller space than a house. The odds of this happening for all of these people is incredibly unlikely. Furthermore, the fossil fuels negated by the trees that they try to argue is so insignificant when the amount of greenery that you're developing in Brooklyn is so unlikely. So the probability that they actually get this impact is incredibly low because there's no reason to assume that they'll actually be using more energy inside of Brooklyn. And secondly, their impact from the trees is completely outweighed by all of our benefits. We turn this entire contention, so this argument really doesn't stand. Now, their second impact, their only other impact was about societal happiness from greenery, and we outweigh this on magnitude. So, judges, under the framework that they chose, the best interpretation I could get of this contention is that it seems our opponents are trying to argue that the people of Brooklyn will be happier keeping the factors that make Brooklyn unique. Judges, consider how little this matters in comparison to bringing more money into the region and value to the neighborhood. Judges, even if you buy every single rebuttal they said to us, even if for some reason the tax money isn't enough to be important, even if the snowball effect that they never addressed on our side never even happens, even if the tax money is just a few $1,000s, consider how much more that helps people than just one small park that very few people even live nearby enough to use. Their entire argument is that people will be a little happier from looking at the parks. They talk about the principle of working on the environment, of not wanting to be like Manhattan, but that's not my framework and it's certainly not theirs either. Again, I would like to go back to our first ballot here about addressing a greater scope. Their claim that this affects 2.5 million people is just not true. Not everybody in Brooklyn can use this park because they're not close enough to use it. So their really only impact is just a few thousand people that can see this park will be happier seeing this park, and that is not enough of an impact to outweigh any of the impacts on our side. So judges, Even if you find the entire case on their side, every single rebuttal that they've given us to be 100% true, this round still goes to us. But now let's look at our framework. We've already shown how we win under their framework, so now let's look at net benefits to this house. Not only is this house probably upper or middle class, like we defined in our contextualization, benefited by this affordability and economic flow that we discussed, but the very demographic that appoint and reappoint this house are also wealthy, either volunteer city council roles, and mainly the 200,000 borough president who appoints this house. They will also see firsthand the taxes flowing in, the effectiveness of this house's policy as the literal city council that they see firsthand how taxes are gained and spent. They have left our framework hanging, ignoring it since speech one, and if you take our framework, we immediately win for all of our impacts previously discussed. So judges, the most important thing I can stress for this entire case is that even if you buy everything they said, their only unique impact doesn't even cleanly fit underneath the framework, so we still win the round. Thank you. All right, good round, guys.
Great work.
Yeah, great round.
You guys were great.
Thank you.